Nomad Capitalist, they made a video, and he's been making this kind of content for years. I'm a subscriber. If you haven't subscribed to his channel, check him out. Talks about going where you are appreciated, going where you're valued the most, especially not limiting your citizenship to one geographical location, having multiple entry residencies and citizenship, multiple passports, so that your freedom is not restricted. Um, and today, this video is going to be talking about BRICS. It's an alliance between that got started off with Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and they came together and they are trying to create a competitor to the West. Uh, you know, in the financial world, in business, and everything. It's like a competitor to NATO. Um, and they're starting to grow. This was something that started off, I think, in 2014. Fast forward today, they're making huge progress in leaps and bounds. And there's multiple countries, more than 40 countries that are now either have already been accepted to BRICS or are looking to join. So it's now called BRICS Plus. Anyway, this video is about getting citizenship and residencies in BRICS countries. Let's listen.
Country is going in the wrong direction and they want an alternative. Western countries have more and more chaos, more and more geopolitical friction, more and more high taxes and regulations with no end in sight. And while the BRICS countries may not be a perfect alternative, they are an alternative. And today I'm going to walk you through residence and citizenship options in the BRICS alliance. And at the end of the episode, I'm actually going to tell you about some non-BRICS countries that emulate some of the parts that Westerners might like about BRICS countries. Why might you want a residence permit or citizenship in a BRICS country? Well, quite frankly, because you feel like the West is going in the wrong direction and you would like to have a plan B in a place that is different. There's nothing wrong with wanting to have citizenship in a European Union country if that's where your ancestors came from and you qualify for citizenship by descent. You can be American and say, I'm going to get my Polish citizenship, and now me and my family have options all throughout Europe. Nothing wrong with that. But what a lot of people look at is they look at, hey, there's nowhere to go because I live in Canada and the US and the UK aren't much better. But you need to look at places that are substantially different. I'm not saying you've got to move there. I'm not saying you've got to put all your money there. I'm not saying you've got to put all your hopes on a country. But if you had a residence permit or a citizenship in a country that was in BRICS or had those features, what would you do? Well, you'd have geopolitical and currency diversification. What are you seeing? Countries around the world are pushing back on new manufacturing hubs. China is obviously a well-known manufacturing hub, but you don't hear much about some of the smaller ones. Vietnam obviously is up and coming. They got into a spat with the U.S. recently. You're seeing even in places like Cambodia. Was reading about, Malaysia is becoming a bigger hub. We've talked about Turkey over the years. I was even reading about Benin in West Africa, one of the biggest cotton exporters, and now they're trying to do more value-add manufacturing. And so what are you seeing? The West and the so-called global South aren't getting along as well. And so when you see, the U.S. wants to ban TikTok, well, what's China going to do? Ban U.S. businesses. We run a global business at Nomad Capitalist. I don't only sell to Americans, far, far from it. And that means no matter what happens, our business can keep going. Even if there's a recession in the U.S. or the U.S. decides, hey, we don't want to allow dual citizenship anymore, we're going to make it harder, I can still run my business. If your business is only selling to one place and you're only collecting money in one currency, not just is that a financial risk, increasingly I see a geopolitical risk as this BRICS effect takes hold and more countries say, we don't want to put up with your terms and conditions the way we used to. Obviously, having access to other currencies, having access to open bank accounts in other places, having access to diversify, and just an alternative to what some are calling the woke West. So let's get into it. Let's start with India and China, two of the original 5 members of BRICS, basically out of the question in terms of residence and citizenship. Now, if you get a job in China, you can get a residence permit. We're not talking about that. We're talking about optionality for entrepreneurs and investors who don't want to necessarily move to the country, but they want the option to move there if time gets tough, or they just want the option to, hey, as a resident or a citizen, I can open a bank account and I've got a different place to park my money. I may not park my money there now, but I can in the future. These are two countries that are tough. If you're of Indian origin, look at getting your OCI. Obviously, China has Hong Kong, its own SAR. I think banking there could be potentially interesting. They do have a residence program now back on the table in Hong Kong with the CIES. But that is a rather niche program for most folks. It certainly is an expensive program. I'm not convinced you always have to be a resident to have a bank account. We're working with our vendors in Hong Kong. There's always an option available. And that could be one to look at from an asset protection standpoint. But India and China largely off the table. Russia, one of the other original five, we've covered that with their anti-woke visa. They also have a golden visa, Russian citizenship, relatively toxic these.
I like anti-woke visa. That should be the key word. Anti-woke visa.
If you want to bank or do other business outside of the Western financial system. So that's obviously been a change in the last 2.5 years. Brazil, not a tax-friendly place to live, but a good residence program. And they do have a residence program if you're willing to invest. If you are willing to marry a Brazilian, if you're willing to have a child in Brazil or adopt a child from Brazil, you can get citizenship in as little as 1 year plus about a year to process that. There is a time commitment to be there in the ground. But when you can get citizenship soup to nuts in as little as 2 years, or as an investor, if you wanted to spend time there, it's going to be a couple years longer. One of the most neutral passports. So an alternative to Russia, where it's very not neutral. Brazil, nobody really has a beef with the Brazilians. Very high quality passport. Travel to the UK, travel to Europe, travel to Russia, travel to Asia. Obviously, you can travel all over South America, which I think for people who are looking for alternatives to the West, I mean, one of the lowest populated land masses in the world is South America. I mean, it's a very small percentage of the world's population for having so much land. Good land, arable land. So people who are looking at kind of that plan B, Brazil could be an option. You can get the residence permit. You can work towards that citizenship. And people like the lifestyle. They like the social lifestyle. You've got good quality healthcare in some parts of the country. Sao Paulo is the New York of Brazil. I've got some friends who absolutely love it there. And then you've got friends who like the safer parts, like down in the south. Florianopolis, for example, comes up. And so Brazil could.
I keep hearing about Florianopolis. I can't wait to go visit it. Can you imagine Brazil? Beautiful scenery, good quality healthcare that's free, or at least accessible to international residents. I mean, what more can you ask for? They speak English. It's worth checking out.
Could be an interesting place to have a toll. I think South America in general, and again, I'm going to come back to how you can replicate some of these BRICS features without actually going to the limited number of countries in BRICS in a minute. South Africa was looking at very affordable waterfront property with a friend of mine the other day from Cape Town, in Cape Town. I would not want that passport. I've advised a few friends of mine to not go back through their family and get that passport because of the whole financial expatriation they have there. It's not at the level of the US yet, but I have some concerns about South Africa's taxes. I would look at other African passports. And I think you have Egypt now with its citizenship by investment program. You've got one candidate running in Ghana who says they should offer a cheap citizenship by investment. There's other ways to get African passports. We're constantly looking into new ways, and we're going to talk about some of those actually at Nomad Capitalist Live, our 4-day annual event you want to get on the waiting list for at nomadcapitalist.com/live. But South Africa is the one I would skip. So there's kind of 5 main original members. I think Brazil is interesting for a number of reasons. The taxes there are certainly not the most friendly. So if you're living there full time, that's going to be a challenge. But if you have an option there, if you've got a residence permit, that could be a reasonable way to diversify into the original BRICS. And what I would encourage you to do is to learn from people who live in these countries, learn from people who come to these countries. They could be good places to live, have a residence permit, or invest. We had a gentleman named Vusi from South Africa speak at the last Nomad Capitalist Live, and he talked about all the opportunities in Africa. You want to understand from people who are actually on the ground how it works. That's what we do. That's what our network does. Let's talk about some of the other countries that are now joining. So Saudi Arabia, permanent residence by investment program. You're going to basically pay $213,000. Yes, you could get a Caribbean citizenship for that same donation, and that might be a better place to start. But if you're building all your options out, who else spoke at Nomad Capitalist Live in the past? Zubi. Zubi grew up in what was then a much more conservative Saudi Arabia. He said it's nothing like you see on the media. What do they have there? They've got strong banking. As a resident, you can access that strong banking. That can be a tunnel access to that banking. By the way, one of the things we've talked about at Nomad Capitalist Live the last couple of years is how you get in with a bank in one country, and that bank has branches in 6 different countries, and now you can move around. And so Saudi Arabia, the Middle East, and also Southeast Asia is one of those regions where you've got banks that have locations in some further flung places that are harder to access as a non-resident. So you get the residence permit that opens up financial, banking, certain investment opportunities in some cases. Saudi Arabia, obviously very tax friendly. That region is becoming a little bit less tax friendly for businesses, like the UAE's 9% tax. Some of the other countries are going to roll it out. From a personal standpoint, very, very, very tax friendly. Saudi Arabia, one of the more conservative countries compared to certainly like Bahrain, for example, which also has a residence permit. You could do that instead. But Saudi, they're in the news. They're saying, oh, should we have the petro yuan? They're really looking at all their options. And so if you want a country that has that sort of heft geopolitically, that you're not going to be a citizen, but you can get that residence permit, and it is for life for that donation. As long as you keep your nose clean, it is for life. The United Arab Emirates, UAE, Dubai, they have numerous different residence programs. Start a company, again, you're going to be paying 9% tax 9 times out of 10. So it's not the most tax-friendly place to go. You could buy a property, get a golden visa. Again, unless you are a really heavy hitter in the business scene and they give you citizenship, as they did, Kevin O'Leary, Pavel Durov, and others, I think that they've done hundreds of those. Otherwise, you're going to have a residence permit. But what's interesting about the Middle East is their residence programs are getting better and better. I'm not saying their corporate tax policies are getting better, but the residence programs, they want to keep people there. They're realizing they don't just want people to go home when it comes time to retire. They want to keep people there longer and longer. It's like, how do we keep people listening to our radio station for longer? How do we keep people, coming back to Starbucks more often? And so Saudi and the UAE are part of BRICS and looking to do that. Egypt has recently joined. They've got 105 million people. Most people don't realize the heft that some of these countries are adding in terms of the population. Same with Ethiopia, where there's no play, and they've got some problems right now. Egypt, not necessarily a place to live, but you can get a citizenship there. And so when I mentioned African passports earlier, what we've talked about for years is the African Union saying, let's all get together more. We're seeing, slowly but surely some evidence of that among different countries. Hey, all Africans are welcome here. They're opening up. There could be increased residence rights, increased investment rights, things like buying land that's off limits to foreigners, certain business opportunities, freedom of movement. It'll be interesting to see what will happen in the next generation for people with African passports. Egypt, while not in sub-Saharan Africa, is in Africa. And so they are now in BRICS as well. That could be an option with a citizenship, to have a residence and citizenship. Again, you want to consider what impact that's going to have. If you've got some fancy Swiss bank, we've talked to some of them and they say, okay, we don't really care. Egypt's not on our naughty list. We're happy with Egypt. But you want to understand holistically what any residence program or citizenship is going to do to you. That's what Nomad Capitalist helps our clients figure out. We have more information, more vendors, more resources, and a bigger in-house team that exclusively does research and development, exclusively does client strategy than I think any other company out there, because we are dedicated to giving you the most options. You don't call and everybody gets sold Egypt. We'll talk about all the different options, and if BRICS is something that you're thinking about, hey, here's one place you can get citizenship. You don't have to live there. You don't have to pay taxes there. You barely have to go there. You have to invest some money. And if that matches your criteria, we can help you find properties that are not from developers, that are marked up in a big way. We can help you find the very limited number of secondhand properties that are reasonable to buy, and you can get that citizenship in a matter of months. And we help people do stuff like that. I'm not saying that's the option for you, but it's an option.
This is good content. I have to stop it there. He's basically what stood out to me is Brazil, Bahrain. He talked about some places in the Caribbean. I know about Keats and Nevis. He did a whole episode on that one. It gets me excited to know that there are a lot of options out there, a lot of different economies that we can, if if it's not working out here in the stateside or wherever your home country is, you are better off trying different places and keeping your options open, because there's, as these economies grow, if you hop onto the train and provide some type of value, you grow with the economies. Um, this is exciting. So keep your options open, get a passport if you don't have one, and travel the world. The world is big. It's a very big world out there. Don't live in a small, myopic world.